Hello, and welcome back to 5 Minutes of Postgres. My name is Lucas, and today I want to talk to you about the upcoming Postgres 19 release and a patch that was just committed to the development branch that will enable better plan management and planner hint extensions for Postgres. This commit by Robert Haas that allows plugin control for path generation strategies is basically a way to give plugins, aka extensions, a way to influence the Postgres query planner in its earliest stages. So when the Postgres query planner builds a query plan, it first generates what are called paths. And the paths might be something like, for this table, use a sequential scan, or alternatively, use an index scan on this index, or an index scan on this other index. If you join these two tables, use a hash join, use a merge join, and such. And then Postgres basically does a combination of throwing away some of these paths early on because they have worse costs. And in other cases, it keeps the paths to then do a full cost comparison and then keeps the best plan basically by its cost. Now, the reason you need a better way to do this is because the challenge here is, as an extension today, you don't really get a way of saying, hey, Postgres, make sure you keep this plan. Postgres might choose to throw away a plan. And so even though today you can modify these paths, without this patch, you're kind of at a loss in certain cases. If you're familiar with today's mechanism for influencing query plans, the most popular extension is PG hint plan. So PG hint plan works by basically putting in a query comment in the beginning of your query. It says something like sequential scan on A, and PG hint plan then does some quirky things to make this work. So the quick gist of how it works is hint plan basically does a combination of influencing Postgres settings, as in, global settings that influence query plans like enable sequential scan. And then it also copies a bunch of code. So for example, we can see here make joinrel.c and core.c. Those are files that basically have some of the regular Postgres source code, because hint plan needed to modify some of these things, need to rerun some of these things, and those were hidden away in internal Postgres files. We can see an example here. So when you think of how does hint plan avoid a hash join, if I want the nested loop or merge join, well, it basically goes and it turns off this global setting of enable hash join. And it just does this a lot whilst the planner is running. And if the planner doesn't give it enough ways to modify it, it basically just reruns the planner with a little bit of modified code. And so this works, right? Hint plan is great because it exists, but it also doesn't work in all cases. Like if you have complex queries, you can't really target the right relations. In some cases, it has a little bit of overhead when you apply a hint. And so it's not great, right? And so with the change that Robert committed to Postgres 19 here, we basically have better infrastructure to build better ways of doing planner hints. Now, the Postgres community has resisted calls over the years to build something in core, and a part of motivation for improving how you can control the planner with an extension is that Robert is proposing a new extension for contrib and Postgres called PG Plan Advice. And the idea behind PG Plan Advice is basically rethinking what is the problem with planner hints. Why don't we want people to do planner hints? And part of that is, if you frame it as a improve or influence query plans in a very arbitrary way, it's just hard to really think through the implications. And so with Plan Advice, what Robert basically set out was, the way I understand it, the goal is that Plan Advice for a given query plan, it can emit a string of advice. And if you pass that string back to Postgres, you get the same plan. So it's not necessarily about a human coming in and saying like, oh, let me go and, tweak the plan some way, but rather it's, can I have repeatable plans so I get the same plan the next time I run it, even if statistics changed. I want to have stable query plans, which I think a lot of people care about. And so I think this is a really great design goal. And so hopefully PG Plan Advice itself makes it into Postgres 19. To be clear, this is still up for discussion, still up for review. If you are a Postgres planner expert, you should be reviewing this patch. That would be great. But independently of whether Plan Advice gets in, even if this wouldn't make Postgres 19, a lot of the necessary infrastructure was added with this one commit here by Robert. Now, let me just give you a really brief version of what this added. So if we look at the changes here inside the Postgres planner, basically what was added was a bit mask. The idea is we have this new PGS mask mechanism, and you set this on relopt info, the structure that you have available in various planner hooks. And so you can now modify this PGS mask to tell Postgres, for this particular table, don't use sequential scans. There was basically no way of doing this before. You had to do the quirky stuff that hint plan had to do. What I ended up doing is basically look at these mechanisms and adapt hint plan to use this. Because even if we get PG plan advice in 19, which would be amazing, I think we will be facing the reality that a lot of people have built on PG hint plan. And so PG hint plan, I think, will continue to exist. And what's really great about this commit in 19 is that it should make the maintenance of hint plan much easier because it avoids hint plan copying any code. Let me show you the specifics here. So with this proposal here that I put together, we're basically seeing that hint plan can lose 2,500 lines of source code. And to quote one of the PG hint plan maintainers, any change that drops code is a good one. The good news is here, we can drop code and the regression test still passed. Specifically, we lose all these copies of Postgres source code. We also have PG hint plan.c, like the core file, has 200 lines less because it's now much simpler because it basically only has to modify this PGS mask versus trying to do all kinds of creative strategies. And so just to show you one more example, when we look at how hint plan modifies which tables get joined and in which way, now hint plan just modifies this mask and said things like, if somebody wants a merge join, we'll make sure we get a merge join in the different ways that Postgres does merge joins. All of this is just a lot simpler and closer to the intent that the user specifies versus having to do a lot of workarounds to try to get Postgres to do the right thing. I think this is great. A big thank you to Robert Haas for driving this effort forward. And I hope we see the full PG plan advice change in 19. We'll see if that holds true. I'll keep you updated. But even if we don't, I think this will be a core foundation for new plan management extensions and new hint extensions in Postgres for many years to come. Thank you so much for listening. This was 5 Minutes of Postgres. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear about the next episode and talk to you next time.